All right, welcome to the Blender interface. So today we're going to talk about the Blender sections or parts of the Blender UI or user interface, and we can kind of slowly talk about the area so that you're not overwhelmed with what you're seeing on the screen. Okay, this is also a model that I built, so this is not something you will find in Blender by default. Usually it starts with a cube, okay? But so that we can have something kind of interesting to look at, and we could see some of the difference in shading and what we can do within Blender. All right, so let's start with the top right here with your menu bar. So typically, you'll find your opening of file and saving of file, importing, very important, how to export those also to different files. You can also recover if you crash your last session, and then you can also do recover the last autosave. You can also revert back to the previous, okay? And you can quickly open recent that you kind of frequent. All right, and then of course there's new and whatnot. Okay, we'll go back to that one, and we'll start a new file so you see what it looks like when you start a new window. All right, so right here I'm going to zoom in. All right, basically your typical menu bar. All right, and below that you will find your tool settings. Okay, if I uncheck this, as you can see, it went away right there. So you get your tool settings right here depending on the tool that is active or the mode that you're active, okay? And then this will be all the viewport options that you'll see. So everything inside the window right here will be kind of viewport options, okay? Very important in Blender that it's like object-oriented programming. It needs to be in context. So if you're trying to do an operation or activating a tool and it's not working, it's very important where your mouse cursor is positioned. So it needs to hover on the area that you can operate the tool. So let's say I want to resize this object right here, okay? Keyboard shortcut for scaling or resizing is S. So if I press S and then I drag the mouse, I can resize that. However, if I'm parked right here, I press S, it doesn't work. So that is probably 90% of beginner Blender users' issue, is that they're trying to follow a lesson, and no matter what they do, it's not happening. It's probably most likely they're not in the position, or their mouse cursor is not hovering to the location where it needs to be. So it has to be in that context. So if you're modifying stuff here using keyboard shortcuts, you need to be at that location, or you need to park your mouse cursor where it matters. Okay, so again, this is your menu bar. Okay, and on the menu bar you have all these tabs right here called Workspaces, and following traditional UI, you will find window right here where you find your workspaces, where you can switch to them, page up, page down. You can create a new window, so on and so forth. So this is standard for all most program, that is. Okay, of course your help, it will be your help section, where it will actually pull an HTML, or it'll drive you to a link. Okay, what else here? Render. So when we actually take a photo of this one, so I'm gonna click on render image right here. So whatever the camera is positioned at, so we're not gonna wait for it to render, because it's quite it takes a while. So basically, that rendering, layman's term, is when you take a photo of your project, okay, and you're able to save that, whether it's a single image or an animation. I'm gonna cancel that. Edit. This is where you'll find your undos and redos depending on your operating system. Usually on a Mac and Windows, you substitute control with the command Okay, but in Blender, most of the tools, they also operate using control and not command. It works kind of the same way, but the representation of the shortcut is representing the OS, which is a Mac OS, and it's going to be the command key instead of control. Okay. Very important also that you find here at the very bottom the preferences. Okay, so this is how you can customize Blender. If I click on preferences right here, this is you can change the look or add activate an add-on. If you don't have a numpad on your keyboard, you can emulate it right here. You could also emulate a 3-button mouse, but you're going to have to work extra with that because you have to. It's a combination of keyboard shortcuts. So let's say you have those touch pad on your laptop and you don't have a 3-button, it can emulate that. All right, so this is where you all find that in the edit preferences section. So interface, you can change everything. You can even have your viewport support certain things if you can actually accommodate it with your hardware. Okay, and there's plenty of stuff here that might not be interesting to you right now, but later on when you're trying to optimize everything, you go in here and you can set up your system customized for you, kind of like undo step set to 32, which is the default. You can also specify right here with your save and load. There's that autosave check, super important that you have that on, especially when you're just starting, when you're not aware of constant saving and whatnot. Okay, file paths also, so that it goes directly to those folders when you're accessing certain things. So fonts, if you got them all over the place or you don't want to contaminate your fonts folder, that's where you do it. Okay, so that would be on the file menu, menu bar right here. Okay, moving on from the menu bar will be your workspaces. So in previous versions of Blender, all this will be just a single window, and you ended up customizing Blender one at a time, so you would adjust this. And then I'm in layout, by the way, so I'm customizing it, and then I can drag a section right there. Then I can change this to, let's say, I want this to be my graph editor when I'm animating, so on and so forth. So you would customize it like this. So ever since 2.8 was released, you now have dedicated workspaces to handle specific tasks. All right, and you don't have to go in there and then change basically everything. All right, so let's say I kind of, let's say, butchered my layout and made it to whatever it is, and I go like, man, I want the original layout right here. I can just right click this. I can either duplicate it or delete it. It goes away, but it can come back if I go to plus right here, general, and then layout. I get another window like so, and this is what I get. All right, and there's a lot of things that you can do with this, but you're pretty much going to spend most of your time probably in layout and modeling when you're just starting. Okay, in modeling, you don't have your timeline at the bottom because it's maximizing its screen for the function of creating stuff. Layout, kind of like a mixed bag. It's kind of like modeling and a timeline in case you wanted to do some quick animations right there and not having to go to the animation workspace where it's dedicated to that, where you see what your camera is going to produce. And you got your timeline right here, and you got a workspace right here, basically your modeling window. Okay, so I'm going to go back to layout. Okay, and we're going to turn on our screencast, and then we're going to talk about all the keyboard shortcuts that we will be using throughout, and we can kind of simplify it for you here. Okay, so going back, we have our workspaces. So like I said, you can just go through this one. They do serve a particular function. Okay, and we will be going with much more detailed video later on the most commonly used one. Like video editing, we're probably gonna just fly through that one. You can, but there's other free software that can do more than just that one. But if you just simply want to put your video and whatnot, you can have it in there. Another one would be your compositing. So this becomes kind of like Nuke or After Effects, where you can put together your different layered, rendered layer, and put them together. You can control them. You can put texture on top of them, change the lighting, so on and so forth. So this is kind of like that. So Blender is truly a super program where it can do a lot of things. The sculpting area, okay, you can sculpt, kind of like ZBrush, okay. I don't know which active object I have, but this is the sculpting area right here. UV editing to tell Blender how you should position those skin for your model, okay. And then of course texture paint. This is where you actually paint on your object so that you can have your own custom texture. All right, so we'll go to those. All right, so next one right here is I'm gonna click on this view, and I want you to see the common stuff right here. So under view, we have toolbar for T. This is your toolbar. So if I press T on the keyboard, it goes away. Press T again, it comes back. It's right there, so it's always on. Sidebar is N. So where do we get sidebar? Sidebar is someone on this area. So if I press N, there's your sidebar. Okay, sidebar is quite useful. You can lock in your camera. You can put in specific coordinates for your object, so they can, you know, I can kind of move it like so by numbers without actually physically moving it here. So the sidebar, you will always have this. Okay. However, right here on view, your sidebar, you can just leave that on if you want to. So you don't have to press N to get the sidebar. You can just put that check mark. Tool settings would be anything below your menu bar right here. So this section, okay? When that thing is unchecked, you won't see that. So why am I showing this to you now? Well, there's a lot. Sometimes when you're just starting, you ended up clicking a lot of stuff and you can't get back that previous window, but you want to keep your workspace. So it's kind of like troubleshooting on stuff that's missing. Of course, you can just abandon ship by right-clicking and deleting this and getting a new layout, and you get back new windows. All right. So next after that one would be your adjust last operation. So this gives you a little option to make changes to parameters on the last command that you do, which is highly recommended that you have this checked. So I wouldn't mind if you have the space to have all this on. The reason why some of these can be unchecked is if you're using a laptop with a small screen, you want to dedicate more on the working space. You probably don't want your sidebar getting in the way all the time. Just press N when you need it, press N to get out when you don't. I have a 27-inch screen right here, so you know, I can just leave that in there. It wouldn't bother me. Okay. All right. Part of the tool settings also here, you will see your pivot point, how you manipulate your object, where do their point of rotation or their anchor, your snapping, and your, you know, which where do you snap to, and some proportional edit. Okay. So this we'll talk about this later, and this is your coordinate system. Okay. This is the like global, the world coordinate system. You have your normal, you have all sorts of stuff here that you can abide. Basically, a coordinate system is your X, Y, and Z and their orientation. Okay. So again, toolbar, press T. Sidebar, press N. Okay. And we have our layout workspace. Okay. At the bottom, if you happen to choose layout or animation, this is your timeline. So basically you walk through time here from 1 till whatever you set it to. This one is set to 500 because I was doing a slow camera rotation animation to showcase the model. All right. Right here at the bottom. Below the timeline would be your kind of like your tool guide. Okay. It tells you what the buttons or the tool would do. So it gives you a little guide right here. Okay, left mouse button, middle mouse button, what it'll do. All right. And we're down to 2 sections now. All right. So we got our, again, menu bar, tool settings, workspaces. This is your viewport screen. Okay, we'll talk about that some more. This is your timeline down here. And over here is your collection. Think of this as your layer or grouping. Right? You're not really grouping them as in grouping them per group. It's more like, because you can have an overlap on your groups here or your collection. You can have objects on multiple collections. So basically here, I just kind of did this real quick right here. So a good example for the collection is I put all my lights to be in one collection, and I named it lights. Okay, you can make a collection by simply clicking the plus sign right there, and then you can name it. And then you can drag the objects into this one, and then you can do several things to it. It's either you can choose not to see it. So if I click on the eye, okay, kind of cleans it up a bit. Again, this is on look dev right here, preview mode. So the lighting didn't go away because this is an HDRI setup. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. We'll get to that one in another video. Okay. Another thing that you can do with your collection is you can add more to what you're seeing by default. So I can have a render here as well. Okay. So if I uncheck selectability, no matter what I do, those area lights, I can't select them. So you can't accidentally select and move them. All right. So that's one way. And then of course, if I click that, they don't get part of the render. Okay. So it's basically a layer system, okay, and a collection system. And the good thing about this also, you can see by list or inventory as a list, as opposed to, let's say, you named it, you don't know, if I name this properly, they would say, back area light, front area light, right area light, so on and so forth. So I don't have to keep guessing here by clicking which one is which. I can just select specifically which object here, which makes it easier. Especially when there's object kind of inside an object, almost all the same size object, intersecting object. They're very hard to select sometimes when you're here. You can localize it, viewing it, but you have to select it first. And just the outliner here just simply makes it, or the collection area just simply makes it a lot easier to select things. Okay. And finally, the property window. Okay. In the property window, we have tabs on the side. Previous versions, you have them kind of horizontally right here. I don't know if you can customize it to that one. I'm pretty sure you can. But these are all the property window dedicated to the object selected. Okay. To the object selected, dedicated to what's applied to that object, okay, as a modifier, so on and so forth. Basically, what you need to do to that object, you can access here. This is where you go, okay? Also, this is where we select what kind of engine we'll be rendering at. What is the range of our animations? If I want to render from select a range in our timeline, what is our frame rate, what is our codec, so on and so forth. So everything is pretty much here. Okay, and then there's lists of these tabs. We're going to have videos dedicated to this. I just want to quickly show it to you. Kind of like this one right here, where in the world settings, whatever I do right here would affect the background and whatnot. Okay, here would be modifiers. So if I did something with this, let's kind of ruin that real quick. There's probably nothing in here. I can put array. Okay, so basically a modifier is something where, okay, so I'm putting like an array duplication of that one, so it's like a factory. Okay, all right, so this again modifies the object, hence modifier. Shading to textures to data, object data, so on and so forth. So everything is right here. Okay, so to summarize the another one, this two right here, part of the menu bar would be your rendered layer or and your scene layer. So basically, a rendered layer are just your rendering that you it lists here. You can actually select them right here if you have multiple rendered layer, like you only want to render the front, the side, the back, so on and so forth. Okay, so don't worry about these. This is we're not going to encounter this unless we're compositing. Okay, but to summarize again, collection or outliner. Okay, property window, sidebar, toolbar, menu bar, workspaces, tool settings. Okay, tool settings, like if you have a brush, you'll see the radius and strength will be here in the tool setting. And last one right here will be your timeline. Okay, so that basically sums up Blender interface. And what we do is basically on what you want to do first. Okay, so if you just want to model, just want to light, it varies. Okay, you don't need to model. You can download some models to begin with if you just simply want to learn lighting or moving. Okay, so let's kind of introduce some stuff here that are not commonly shown on a lot of videos, because you've probably seen some videos in Blender and they usually just work on this single screen. Okay, the single screen is my preference. Okay, I can do control spacebar here and it just kind of full screen it. So if I want to work in just all keyboard shortcuts and whatnot, I have more real estate. Again, this depends on if you do have that real estate to actually pull this off. Okay, the reason why I don't do this a lot when I'm teaching is that you don't get to see what I'm doing. Okay, and even when I'm doing keyboard shortcuts, I point where that button is. All right, so you can see, because if I just go spamming all my keyboard shortcuts here, then you wouldn't know what's happening. All right, so let's take a look here. Quite common, let's say 3D Studio Max, even Softimage or Maya. Okay, they all kind of work starting with 4-screen, and Blender has that as well. So if we go down here where it says Object Mode and then View Area, okay, you can toggle to Quad View. It's actually Control, Option or Alt Q. Okay, that's a keyboard shortcut. So if I go Control, Option or Alt, and then Q, it toggles to 4-screen. However, these are your default ones, so you get your top right here. And you can change this, but these are the default, and front and the right side. And you have your camera. Okay, so if you want to see, and this is highly recommended when you're just starting, so you can preview pretty much what's happening on the screen all at the same time and viewing it as if you have 4 cameras active. If you do want to change some of this to certain views, you're going to have to make those changes. You can work on your axis moving right here and so on and so forth. But I just want to show that to you, that you can actually work this way, not always as a full screen. I do work in full screen because it's a lot easier to see what's happening on the screen, seeing it as a one big screen. Okay, so Control Alt Q is your keyboard shortcut, or you go to View Area at the bottom and then toggle Quad View. Okay, so how do we change our full screen into different viewport? Okay, that depends also. If you can easily do this by clicking on your numpad. Okay, your numpad number 1 switches it to front orthographic. You see the name right there, it's represented by that. Okay, if I click Control N1, it shows the back orthographic. Okay, so adding control to the numpad shows you the opposite of that one. So number 3 shows you the right side. Control 3 should show you the left side. If I hit 7, it shows the top. If I hit Control 7, it shows the bottom, which it's in solid mode right now, but if I go to a wireframe, you can see it right there. We're seeing the floor, that's why it's black. Okay, so if I press 0, let me switch this back and we'll talk about those. Okay, it switches to what the camera is seeing. So this is the recording camera. If I press 0, it referred it back to the working camera. I mean the modeling camera or setting camera. Okay, so so this is a working camera. Press 0 is the recording camera. And if I can show you that actually. If I press number 7 right here, physically there's that. So when we press 0, we're actually looking through the lens of this camera. Okay, so to recap, 0 goes to camera, numpad 1 front, numpad 3 side, numpad 7 top. Okay, you can also look into an orthographic view. If you press number 5, it changes from perspective, which has depth, to orthographic, which is flat. So number 5 on the numpad. Okay, so a lot of new students, they freak out over that one. They accidentally press it and then they go like, hey, this looks like one of those isometric games. Yes, it is. 3/4 view, 45-degree angle. Okay, so press number 5, you get your kind of like what the human eye will see. Okay, so that kind of summarize the viewport and Alt Control Alt Q toggles from 4 to 1 viewport. Okay, and I think we can end this video here to just to kind of get everyone familiar with the interface. And there's more, of course, but that just to kind of sum it up, what all these things are and what you can do with it. Okay, for now.